What's going on, truth seekers, conscious leaders, and world changers? Welcome to my channel. For those that do not know me, my name is Zach Blakeney, and today I'm going to attempt to elevate your consciousness by answering the question, why does this keep happening to me? Do you ever find yourself asking that question? Well, it's an answer that can be seen so many different times in your life because of something called patterns. Right? So when we ask ourselves that question, why does this keep happening to me? That means that it has happened multiple times. And to give you a straight through, it's going to keep happening to you until you realize that you need to move through acceptance, understanding, and forgiveness to start to eliminate and remove the pattern outside of your life, out of your thoughts, your emotions, and your mind. So let's talk about patterns for a second. Patterns are thoughts, emotions, and behaviors that continually happen over and over again, and normally will come in greater intensity every single time they come back into your life. And the stimulation of the question, why does this keep happening to me, actually is one of the blocks for you to understand why this is happening to me. Because when we use these questions of why and how, and typically they come from an emotionally distraught, fear-based state, they end up being rhetorical, right? Why does this keep happening to me? Well, there's a lot of fear inside of that when we say it. There's really no intention for us to figure out why, because the next thing that happens is this hopelessness that's been built up through this question doesn't stimulate motivation to actually find out why. It then moves into more of a spiral of feeling hopeless, feeling victimized by this pattern that continually shows up. But the truth is that you are the one creating the pattern. Victimhood and the ability to take full and 100% responsibility for your choices, your ownership of your choices, and the responsibility for the result of your choices is one of the hardest things for us to do because of a lot of different reasons. But one of the main reasons is the confusion between I did not create my life, but I am the powerful creator of my experiences. So it's my belief that I did not create my life. The higher consciousness, God, whatever you want to call this higher being that I believe is all of us together, is a part of co-creating my life. But once I'm in my life, I create my experiences. So I'll give you an example of a pattern that was consistent for me that I knew was something that I had to start working through or it was going to keep showing up. And this pattern has to do with lying, right? So when I was lost inside of my own addictions and definitely not aligned with who I consciously intend to be, to my authenticity, I would find myself lying for a lot of different reasons. Being inadequate, right? So I would lie to make myself better than I was. Also, I would lie to make myself appear to be better than I was when I was doing something that I was shameful about. So when I held guilt and shame, I would lie about it so nobody else would see me in a guilt and shame lens. On the other end, I could lie about making more money in my business than I actually was to try and seem better than this, or better than where I actually was, right? To seem better than to the person I was lying to so that they would see me as a great businessman. And this was a pattern that continually showed up because the result is I wasn't actually making the amount of money that I said I was making, or I wasn't actually acting in the way that I was putting a face on to act. So it got me in a lot of trouble. I would find myself not only feeling shame about lying, right, in which that is a repetitive emotion to the lying, but I also would not achieve, if we're just going to use the one example of the amount of money I was making in my business, I wouldn't achieve the amount of money that I was making in my business. So every time I lied about it, it tricked my mind to believe I already had the thing. So I fell into complacency and I wouldn't go after that. And I found myself in this pattern very consistently where I would lie about how much money I was making, but I would never get to the amount of money that I was actually lying about that I was making. And it put me into a really hard spiral because I knew internally, I knew the truth that these lies were the pattern that I needed to stop to actually get to the money I said I was making. And that is what started to change when I realized it. I felt enough pain, I felt enough inadequacy, I felt enough shame and guilt around this experience of lying because it wasn't true to my soul. And I kept doing it, so the intensity of it kept getting worse and worse. I started feeling worse and worse about myself as I kept doing it because the pattern was there for me to pivot from so that I wouldn't do that anymore. And I didn't learn my lesson. I would lie, get in trouble, feel shame. I would lie, get in trouble, feel shame. I would lie and get in trouble, feel shame, on repeat. And then I would ask from a very victimized state, why is this happening to me? When I already knew the answer, but again, that was blocking me from actually accepting that it was a problem. So I had to accept that this was a pattern that I was having. So if you right now are in this experience and you keep asking yourself, why does this keep happening? The first thing you need to do is say, why does this keep happening? I need to accept the reason that I already know in my heart of why it's happening, and then be able to sit in it, because what we do as humans is we avoid the intensity of the pain and instead we will take a little bit of pain the entire time. So we're okay with a little bit of pain, but the intensity of the pain we stay away from. And when we stay away from the intensity of the pain, that's the inability to accept it. We'd rather deal with a little bit than a lot. But when we deal with a lot, then we can actually learn how to pivot from it because the experience is more real. I always use the example of I would rather be in the middle of the ocean and start drowning, which would force me to learn how to swim to shore, than to just wade above water as long as I could, knowing the inevitable is coming. And there's a lot of you out there, and there's a lot of people out there that are just wading above water, waiting for somebody to come and save them, when in all actuality, you need to drown to learn how to swim to get to the shore. And this is what this is about. So for the next step is understanding. Again, once you can accept the fact, okay, this pattern keeps showing up in my life, I need to seek to understand. And this is where you can really start to pivot away from the pattern, because you can sit down and look and say, okay, when I do this, or when I say this, or when I feel this, right? It's all thoughts, emotions, or habits. There is an outcome that happens consistently that I don't want to have happen. So to understand it, I need to look at my thoughts, my emotions, and my behavior, and realize which one of these, or maybe all three, typically all three, which one of these is kind of the origin point of me acting and getting a result that I don't want to get. And from there, I need to then pivot and do something different, right? And doing something different is so scary because it's not something that we've done before, but would you rather do something different than continue to experience the same pattern of pain? And these are questions that we don't ask ourselves when we're in our shit. Instead, again, we ask the why and how questions. So once we can figure this out, we can also start to extract the lesson. And the lesson is the key. The faster you can figure out why this is happening for yourself to understand the lesson. So what was the lesson for me? Well, the lesson for me is that I wanted to be truthful, right? I wanted to be straightforward the entire time. I also wanted to achieve a certain level of revenue in my business. And I noticed that my doing this, right, and lying about this was the gap between the revenue that I wanted to get to. So what happened? Well, I started being honest. This is where I am. By saying that and accepting that this is where I am. Oh, now I can see this gap clearly. This gap in my actual physical activities, right? The things I'm doing every day in my business is not working. This is working pretty well. Maybe I should add something else in. And now I started to elevate my revenue because I was being honest with myself about where I was. And by being honest to other people, it reflected back to me the truth of the matter, which is I want to get to a certain level of revenue and I'm not there. And through that honesty, I looked at it, right? So that was my lesson. By being honest with myself and others about the success of my business, that allows me to see in truth where my business actually was. And then I started to generate more revenue to the point of where I used to lie about. All because I was honest with myself and I understood that I could not continue. The lesson was if you continue to lie, because this keeps showing up for you, if you continue to lie, you're going to continue to not achieve the level of revenue success that you want to achieve. there's a lesson. Okay, now I have to pivot to do something different. Cool. The lesson is so incredibly valuable for you to pivot, because the next time this shows up for you, you remember, oh wait, no, if I choose this thing that I've been choosing, I know the lesson, I know what's going to happen, I'm aware of that, so I'm going to pivot and do something different to create a new experience so I don't have to ask the question, why does this keep happening to me? And then lastly, and this is one of the hardest levels to get through, it is forgiveness. You need to forgive yourself for the pattern. And again, sometimes these patterns can be really deep and hard to deal with. Like addiction is a pattern, right? You keep doing the same thing over and over again. It's a very apparent pattern. Sometimes these other patterns are really subtle and they're hard to pick up on until they increase in intensity to get your attention a little bit more and say, okay, this is something that is a problem that I need to actually learn from. So again, going back to why these are hard for us to forgive is sometimes these patterns cause a terrible amount of pain, not only for you, but also for the people that were around you. So, you know, when I look at some of these things I've done in the past, like for instance, my divorce was all stimulated from addiction and lying and manipulation and all these things. I had to learn to forgive myself. I figured out the lesson. Oh crap, like this is not working for me. Here's all the things that I've been doing that is not serving me. And now I'm going to learn all these lessons. But even with the lesson, you can still sit in beating yourself up in regret, right? And it's hard to get through a pattern if you're still regretful about that pattern, and you won't be regretful about that pattern if you extract the lesson. And then you won't be regretful about that pattern if you extract the lesson and make a new pivot and start doing something new that serves you, because then you can realize that, oh, wow, I don't have to have regret for this thing. I can actually be very grateful for me, for actually having the courage to accept and sit in my understanding, and now be able to move forward away from this pattern that I was experiencing so much limitation and pain. So inside of that, you making a new action that's more aligned and actually moves you forward will help with forgiveness, because then you can really start to see the lesson. A question I always ask is, how do you turn regret into gratitude? Well, the answer is that. You can take something you regret that's in your past because you don't understand the lesson of how it moved you forward, extract the lesson, and then be almost instantly grateful for that experience, because then you realize, oh, this experience, this pattern, right, was here to push me to go further. And that is the overarching thing, is that patterns will continue to show up in your life because they're for you to learn a lesson. And if you don't learn the lesson the first time, it's going to show up again. If you don't learn a lesson again, it's going to show up again. It's going to keep showing up for you until you become aware of it and do something with it. You know, a lot of really common patterns can be like relationships, right? Like getting into a codependent relationship, or always picking some sort of, and I don't want to, it's sad if this happens to you, but some sort of abusive partner, mentally, emotionally, physically. How do I just end up with these bad guys, right? How do I continue to attract the same type of woman, right? Over and over again. It's because, again, you're not learning your lesson through the process. So what I want you to do is to really think about the patterns that you're experiencing in your life right now, and to become very aware of them and accept that they are patterns, and accept that they're patterns that are causing you pain, and start moving through acceptance, understanding, and forgiveness, so that you can start to move past that pattern, past that limitation, and through higher consciousness, level up to the next best version of you. That's what I got for today for patterns. They're very interesting. There's a whole bunch of depth that you can go into, but you need to understand that your choices are yours. You make all the choices in your life. Nobody else chooses for you. You make these choices. I even believe that you program your patterns before you even come into incarnation. What does that do for me? It makes me realize that the only person that is responsible for my experience is me. And through that process, I can look at it through a truthful lens. So I would invite you to do the same. If you really enjoyed this lesson, please comment down below. Let me know what reflections have come up. And if you enjoy these videos and other videos that I'm putting out, please like, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you don't miss out on any video. With that being said, I love you all, and I'll see you next time.